We're several days into this insane feud that has developed out of the military situation in Niger just a couple of weeks ago. And it's gone through multiple iterations. And the latest one that we're on is there's this concerted effort coming out of the White House to discredit the Congresswoman Frederica Wilson because she happened to be present for a presidential phone call to the widow of a soldier slain in the field. And the willingness to play fast and loose with facts about speeches that have been given, coming not just out of Donald Trump where we would expect it, but out of generals like John Kelly is certainly disappointing. And so we're gonna show how the most recent attack by John Kelly during his emotional speech yesterday about what it's like to be a father who's lost a soldier in combat. We're gonna break down some of the mistruths that were spread during that speech. But first, in case you didn't see it, here is General John Kelly.
And a congresswoman stood up, and in the long tradition of empty barrels making the most noise, stood up there and all of that, and talked about how she was instrumental in getting the funding for that building, and how she took care of her constituents because she got the money, and she just called up President Obama, and on that phone call, he gave the money, the $20 million to build the building. And she sat down. And we were stunned. Stunned that she'd done it. Even for someone that is that empty a barrel, we were stunned. But you know, none of us went to the press and criticized. None of us stood up and were appalled. We just said, okay, fine.
It's an organic, totally not planned narrative when you use the expression empty barrel like 3 times in a minute-long bit of speech there. Yeah, so also saying there was the little chyron at the bottom that said, stunned that she would listen in on the call. There's this complete lack of interest in actually understanding the relationship between this congresswoman and not just the widow, but the soldier who was actually killed. And that would allow you to understand exactly why the situation played out the way it was. And we're gonna get to the substance of it. We're gonna play a little bit of the speech that shows how wrong he was there. But there's this inability in the White House to understand when you've made a little error and simply kill it just by apologize, move on. They have to double down. And Donald Trump's need to do that draws in people like John Kelly into giving a speech like that I'm sure he had no interest in giving and was probably pushed into. But anyway, he says there that she's an empty barrel, grandstanding. Apparently, this recent situation is just an example of it because you can go back and see other examples, like when she took credit for this FBI building. So here is the actual speech that she gave that he was alluding to.
The brand new federal building that will house the FBI has been built. And the FBI approaches my office. Congresswoman Wilson, the ribbon cutting has been scheduled in 4 short weeks. The dedication is on the government's calendar and cannot be changed. One problem, the FBI wants to name this gorgeous edifice at the same time in 4 weeks. Everyone said that's impossible. It takes at least 8 months to a year to complete the process through the House, the Senate, and to the President's office. I said, I'm a school principal. And I said, excuse my French, oh, hell no. We're gonna get this done. Immediately, I went to an attack mode. I went to the speaker, Speaker Boehner, and I said, Mr. Speaker, I need your help. The FBI needs your help, and our country needs your help, and we have no time to waste. He went into attack mode, and in 2 days, pulled it out of committee, brought it to the floor for a vote. Representative Corbell and I presented it. We all voted, and I dashed it over to the Senate and put our senators on notice. Put it on your radar. Senator Nelson and Senator Rubio, who I believe have representatives here today. They hotlined it to the Senate floor in just 2 days. And guess what? The president signed the bill into law this past Tuesday, April 7th, 15 with a bang, bang, bang. It is a miracle, to say the least, but it speaks to the respect that our Congress has for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the men and women who put their lives on the line every single day. And today we're providing a boost to our nation.
So it goes on like that, but what you see there is that she is talking about the process, at this dedication, of getting some additional funding. And to the extent that she's grandstanding, she's also giving credit to basically everyone else along the way.
Yeah, she's quite inclusive.
It was an anecdote about finalizing something for the building, and not what General Kelly said, which is claiming she got the money to build the building and made it all about herself. You could say that she's giving a rambling anecdote, and that's what politicians do, unfortunately. But to say that this is an example of her trying to take credit for everything herself and to discredit her so that you can't believe that she represents that widow who has come out and confirmed that Trump said what he said. Trump's own people in the White House have confirmed that he said what he said, and they're attempting to muddy the waters and confuse you about the entire thing.
Well, and just as a testament to the anecdote that she was giving, James Comey was at that dedication as well. He was the FBI director then, and it was in his prepared remarks as well, discussing the importance of it having a name for the dedication and how quickly the Congresswoman was able to provide the sort of the initial boost to get that to happen. It was really a big deal for them.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like she was out of left field either. This was part of their prepared remarks. I think it just goes back to the fact that this is a reflection of, and I know this is an easy go-to, but it's also true, of what Trump's MO is as sort of this burgeoning autocratic approach, which is to cash in on other people, to make them go out there and subjugate themselves. I've watched every time he's pulled Kelly on stage. He's done it multiple times. And in every event, Kelly says not a single word. He just nods, points to the president and claps, and everybody cheers and he walks away.
Yeah.
He had to give this speech just like Tillerson had to do it 3 weeks ago, and I didn't say he was a moron. Every time he makes people go out there and do that.
And then eventually cast them off.
That's exactly right. He just burns their credibility down and then sort of moves on. And I think that's a reflection of his overall approach.
Look, I wish that there hadn't been this weird tangent in the news, but I do think it's important, especially for Trump supporters, to understand that once you forget about the John Kelly and the Wilson thing, but the disrespect given routinely from Donald Trump to the Gold Star families and all that is important. I don't know that it'll actually penetrate any of his supporters, that they'll be affected by it. He has been routinely disrespectful towards the military for multiple years now at this point. But that is something, and hopefully, once this has been resolved, we can get back to the real story, which is what actually happened in Africa, how we got to that situation. Not just what actually happened that night, but why that situation developed. There was last night, I believe Rachel Maddow talked a little bit about some of the policy decisions that might have led to that, having to do with Chad and things like that, so you can do that research as well. But that is an interesting situation. The reason we have this tangent is because Donald Trump refused to go on record about what actually happened on the ground there. And it might well be, I saw this editorial and it was, don't make this situation into Trump's Benghazi. And what I actually think is this is exactly like Benghazi. Not what Benghazi became, but what it actually was, which is a military situation that ended in tragedy. And more than likely, although information is still coming in, including today, that resulted in some bad decisions, a lack of planning. In this case, it seems like probably an over-reliance on unreliable private contractors, which we talk about a lot on this show, that there's no huge conspiracy, there's just irresponsibility and poor decision making. But we didn't actually get to have that conversation because Donald Trump refused to actually go on the record and talk about what happened, to try to cover for the incompetence on the ground, and made the situation so much worse because he refused to be forthcoming.
Yeah, you're exactly right. In fact, during this, when this whole thing was first happening, I thought, I hope the president's going to ask about why our troops are there, what that mission is all about. Of course, that's not what happened. It ended up being a whole question of how come you waited so long to call the families, and it turned into what we've just been talking about. But the specifics also of how Trump has tarnished, and how Kelly and this administration has tarnished this congresswoman, how she was listening in on the call, when in truth, it makes it, there's a sense that everybody's sitting around and she's listening on the extension, It was
the widow put it on speakerphone, which because she gets to do that if she
was
wants
driving to pick up the corpse of her dead son. and the congresswoman was accompanying her, and the call came in, and it was on the speakerphone. There's nothing damning about that scenario.
Yeah.
And it explains, as you say, the relationship between the congresswoman and the family and that fallen soldier.
Yeah.
But the fact that it has been politicized, to use the overused word, but it's quite appropriate, but also that it's been used to somehow tarnish this very proud family and this congresswoman is just abhorrent to me.
Yeah, yeah, and again, look, obviously this whole situation, very important, but I agree, like at some point, the real story is, even outside of this one incident, it's the contextual battle that's going on in this region, and I believe today, I forget who it was, a senator talking about how, it might have been Lindsey Graham talking about how the war has shifted to Africa. And it's a complicated region. Multiple countries bordering Niger are dealing with situations with terrorist groups that are at least affiliated with ISIS, or at least philosophically aligned to some extent with ISIS. And people need to know about that. There needs to be a conversation about the number of troops that are there, what the mission is, how do we assess if it's been successful or not? Are we simply going to leave them for years on end, as we have in other areas? How many troops are actually there? Is it 100 or is it 1,000? That seems important. I think that we should probably know that. And we are still waiting for some information to come out about this particular incident. It will come out. There's an investigation ongoing, but in particular, the private contractor that sent the rescue, the helicopter, if it was their fault for leaving behind a soldier, we need to know that. And we have been long overdue for a larger conversation about the role of private military contractors in our operations. And maybe this could be one of the things that leads to that.
I'm so glad you mentioned private contractors, because just quickly, there is a big move. Eric Prince, the Blackwater head, they're the big contractors who made out like crazy on the Iraq War. He is pushing, and he did it in a New York Times editorial. He's pushing for the privatization of all of these wars, that we contract all of these different things out, that now is the time to privately contract all of these different skirmishes and war theaters out. And this is the administration to help him do it. If ever there was a time in this country when we would hand over the keys to our military to private contractors, it's now. So just keep your eye on that ball as this entire debate continues. Anything to do with the military, keep your eye on the private contractor part of that equation.
If you like this clip of the Young Turks, you know there's a whole live 2-hour show, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day, and you can download it or stream it and watch it without ads if you become a member. tytnetwork.com/join.